So what happens when a follower publicly challenges their leader? Well, we're about to find out. We're going to dive into a raw, unfiltered, and pretty brutal letter from a leader named Zhu Feng to one of his followers. It's a fascinating look at power, loyalty, and, the real cost of speaking out.
Right out of the gate, this letter does not pull any punches. The leader, Su Feng, makes the stakes crystal clear. This is not going to be a friendly debate. In his eyes, this is a serious mistake, a transgression that leads directly to humiliation. So who are the two people at the center of all this?
On one side, you've got Shi Feng. He's the guide, the leader, and as you can see, he positions himself as the sun at the very center of his community's universe. And on the other side, Shi Zhou, a follower who dared to become a critic, a planet in this analogy. Now, you have to remember this framing because it is absolutely crucial to understanding everything that comes next. So, what exactly did this follower do that was so terrible? Xu Feng doesn't just call it a disagreement or a different opinion. No, he calls it something way more severe, a strategic error. It all started with an article. Shi Zhou published a piece that analyzed and, ended up refuting his guide's views on artificial intelligence. Now, in most circles, you'd think this would spark a pretty interesting discussion, right? Not here. For Shi Feng, this was a fundamental breach of protocol. And see, Su Feng's idea of a strategic error isn't about being wrong on the facts. It's about being, and this is his phrase, small head smart, big head stupid. In other words, you might be clever enough on a tactical level to write a fancy article, but you're strategically foolish enough to completely forget your place in the grand scheme of things. The real mistake wasn't the argument, it was the act of public contradiction itself. To really get why this was such a huge deal, you gotta understand the world this was all happening in. It's a world that operates under a very, very specific set of unbreakable rules. And Xu Feng is super clear about this. He flat out says that his community is not a cultural salon. It's not a place to hang out and debate ideas. It's a place for following. The whole point isn't discussion, it's alignment with the guide. And that's the core tension right there. So the community has these 4 key prohibitions. First, don't ask questions until you've read everything. Second, never, ever try to guide the guide. And probably most important for our story, you do not engage in debates, and you definitely do not challenge the leader's authority. From Xu Feng's point of view, Shi Zhou broke at least 3 of these cardinal rules with just 1 article. Okay, so let's get to the central metaphor Xu Feng uses to explain how things are supposed to work. It's not a business model, it's not a political system, it's cosmic. We're talking about the solar system. So why the solar system? Well, in Xu Feng's mind, it's the perfect model of order, of stability, and of hierarchy. Think about it. It's worked flawlessly for billions of years. And why? Because everything in it knows its place and follows its path without a single question. The analogy is really simple. The guide, he's the sun, the immovable center, the source of all light and energy. The followers, they're the planets. Their job is to orbit, to follow a path that's already been set for them. They reflect the sun's light. They don't create their own. So for Xu Feng, the greatest virtue of all is consistency. A planet's whole value comes from knowing its exact position, its coordinate point relative to the sun. It never deviates. It never, ever breaks the rules. And that's the ideal he holds up for every single one of his followers. And this all leads to the ultimate rhetorical question of the entire letter, right? What actually happens when a planet, when Earth, decides it wants to be the sun? In this model, the answer isn't just chaos, it's self-destruction. It's a complete violation of the natural order of the universe. And if you thought that was intense, hold on, because this is where the letter gets really personal. Xu Feng pivots from these big cosmic principles to a direct, and I mean scathing critique of Shi Zhou's character and his writing. This right here, this is the philosophical core of his entire takedown. He argues that the very act of thinking you are right, so right that you challenge the guide, is the first and biggest mistake you can make. He even says that most of the world's sins are caused by people who are just so convinced of their own righteousness. Wow, I mean, this comparison is just devastating. Xu Feng basically peels back what he sees as the surface of the article. The flowery language, the classical references, what he calls the nobleman's suit. And what does he find underneath? thought garbage, piled up ignorance, and a deep, deep arrogance. He says he could feel the arrogance from the very first paragraph. So after this total deconstruction, is there any way back? Actually, yes. The letter ends with a prescription, a path forward, not just for Shizo Kao, but really for all the followers. This proverb he uses just captures the final lesson perfectly. Know your tools, know what you're capable of, and don't take on a job you're not equipped for. In his view, Shizo Chao tried to work on this delicate, master-level porcelain, that is, refuting the guide's philosophy, without the diamond drill of true, deep understanding. So the advice is pretty straightforward. Go back to being a follower. Be humble, be modest, stop trying to show off. Contribute quietly without making a big deal about it. And he ends with this really beautiful, if kind of pointed, image. If you're truly a magnificent peony, you don't need to force yourself to bloom. Your day will come, naturally, when the time is right. And that leaves us with a final and pretty heavy question. This whole letter is a case study in a very specific kind of power structure. It really forces you to ask, in any system that's built on these fixed orbits and absolute hierarchy, what's the real cost of a single deviation from the path?